Welcome to FNT, Functional Neurotalks, with Precision Brain Center.
All right, welcome back to Functional Neurotalks with Precision Brain Center. My name is Elena, and this is Dr. Gabella.
Hello.
So today we have a really big subject that I would say basically everybody has struggled with at some point in their lives, anxiety. So we've been getting a lot of attention on this on social media. So today we'll be talking about a little bit of like what the brain perspective for it is, some real life scenarios, and maybe some tips and tricks on how to help. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so anxiety is something that a lot of us are impacted with, right? And it's no surprise because our brain is very complex and we actually have a lot of circuitry that's involved with anxiety. We typically like to think of, and this is everything I discuss, I really try to take the science and I try to make it as digestible and simplistic as possible without oversimplifying, because then you don't gain anything. So the first area we're just going to talk about is the limbic system. So we like to group things together as the limbic system, and what that means is it's a system that controls our emotions, okay? And the main areas that we think about when we think of the limbic system is your amygdala, which I'm sure you've heard me say that before, your hippocampus, which we've talked about when we discuss memories, because that is our big memory storage. And we also know from the research how cool it is to be able to create new connections in that hippocampus through exercise, right? So the hippocampus is part of your limbic system, your hypothalamus, which we think of with body temperature regulation, with autonomic functions. It's a big area of the brain that's involved in autonomic regulation. So it is a part of our autonomic nervous system. I know a lot of people have heard that hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal system. So that's where that comes in. And then we also have the cingulate cortex, which is a cortical area. Our cortex is pretty majestic. It's what makes us human. It's a higher up thinking, higher up processing. And so when it comes to emotions, we have to have the ability to have introspective on it. We have to have a higher processing, and that's that cingulate area, right? And so as we discuss with emotions, we have a whole array of emotions, right? We have those good, positive, joy, happiness, things like that, and all the way down to that fear, anxiety, depression, pain, suffering. And that whole entire spectrum is created because all of these areas come together for us and they allow us to have these type of emotions. And compared to other animals, our emotions are huge. And then we also have the understanding of our emotions. So what gets tricky as the brain gets more complex and we evolve and we get more connections, the stronger we have with emotions. I mean, we also have a higher probability for things to go wrong, right? So the more interconnectivity, the more complicated your brain is, and we're talking about individuals, right? The more suffering there's going to be. And the easier it is for things to get a little out of whack. And so when I say out of whack, we're thinking about an orchestra, right? And we have a symphony, and all these instruments are playing right on key at the right time, and things sound fantastic. But if one instrument gets out of sync, right, things can feel really chaotic and really bad quickly.
That's actually a great analogy.
Yeah.
So with that, you know how when one person messes up, then that can affect other people? Is it almost the same thing in the brain where like one thing might misfire or something might...
That's a great example right there. Actually, I've never thought about that. But yes, absolutely, right? So if you have just one little area that's sending the wrong messages, that area is responsible to firing to thousands of other areas. So it's going to naturally make those other areas not work well.
Yeah.
And so the other thing we want to think about is the way everybody's brain works, right? Not necessarily individuality. We are meant to survive and to thrive. And at the very minimum, our autonomic nervous system wants to do that for us. So hundreds of years ago, we had a very different demand on what it required of the brain to survive and thrive. And we were trying to, go hunt and catch our food and harvest crops and get through the winter. And our body was trying to use our immune system to fight all these crazy diseases that now today we don't deal with anymore, right? So our brains had to shift over to other things that we're dealing with, which are social media, right? That's a whole new realm, and we're looking at the research, and it's really changing the way our brains work, but it's also creating a whole different demand that's pretty unnatural for us as human beings, because a digital world is now separating us from the actual interpersonal connection, being face to face with somebody. And so if our brains are wired for us to survive, right, we don't want to get injured. We don't want to get attacked by a beast, right? So if I'm out in the woods and there's an animal that's going to be attacking me, my autonomic nervous system is going to respond. I'm going to have massive amounts of fear and anxiety. My heart rate is going to go up. My blood pressure is going to go up. And it's helpful because that's going to allow me to get out of dodge, to escape whatever's attacking me, this physical threat, right? But now we live in a world, like, of course, we have human-to-human threats that are happening 24/7, but we also have this constant feeding of information. And so it's driving our nervous systems to feel like we are under attack 24/7, but there's no lion or tiger coming after me. So my brain has gotten really confused, and I'm feeling constant panic and anxiety without the actual threat. And so that's where we look at what happens to the brain to get us to that point. So what we do know is any concussion or any brain injury, and it can come from so many sources. It can come from toxin exposure, it can come from viruses, it can come from actual physical trauma, like you bump your head, right? It can come from hypoxia, which means you don't get enough blood to the brain. It can come from so many different things. Just not having a good diet is enough to do that. We got heavy metals, you got all different things that just are not good, healthy, productive stuff for our body. And if it's gonna cause inflammation in the body, you better believe that's gonna have an impact on the brain. So we know, then we start thinking, what are the areas of the brain that are the most complex, that have to fire and protect us at all times? And so the first thing you're going to think is autonomic nervous system. Game over, hands down, right? And reason being is that's controlling our blood supply, and it's controlling blood supply to every cell in the body. Super important, and it's involved in that hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal system. But then we're human beings, so what makes us so much different than the other animals, right? Is that we have this higher up cognitive thought and this emotionality, this ability to look at somebody and say, they're having a bad day. I can tell by their body language, and now I can feel their pain and suffering. These are huge emotions that are really marvelous. It's incredible. We look at the way we nurture our children and how we get so attached to these infant babies that we're taking care of all of their needs. Well, that's your limbic system. That's how we get so attached. That's how we experience all these wonderful emotions. So it's not a surprise that now we've got this very complex system that has a high probability of being affected by any insult on our nervous system. And even medications, unfortunately, have a negative consequence on our brains, especially psychiatric or neuroleptic type of medications and things like that. So we have a lot of people that end up having to be on them for a temporary. If you're having anxiety and depression, you don't want to live that way, right? But there's a consequence to that stuff. And so then we're looking at a population where everybody's like, oh my gosh, I just can't even leave my house without feeling anxious, right? And it's a really sad, heartbreaking thing. So I think it's empowering for people to understand anxiety has become this prominent symptom because our brains are no longer healthy. That's the bottom line. We're not living in a world that's real favorable to brain health. And we can only do so much, right? Like you cannot control every variable, but there are some good choices you can make that are very brain friendly and to help. The other thing to remember is that our memory system, what makes us who we are as people. So my memories have created and led to my personality, which is pretty cool. A lot of people don't realize that. But your memories are also very connected to emotions, right? So an example that's really helpful is if somebody's ever broken into your house, if you listen to somebody retelling that story, they will know all these crazy details, right? Because that memory was tied in with such a huge anxiety response, right? That emotions going together. So when we look at hippocampal function, I'm going to go back to this because this gives a little bit of a little gem for people to do to kind of help their anxiety level at home. But when we think of hippocampus, you want to think memory, right? Super important area. It also has a lot of ability for stem cell production in that hippocampus. So we really want to keep that hippocampus healthy because when we're looking at aging and we're looking at healthy agers and people that don't age healthy, like Alzheimer's and dementia, right? The difference is that hippocampus. We want to keep it nice and healthy, interconnected. It's involved in our emotions as part of our limbic system. It's feeding information to the amygdala, mammillary bodies, all these wonderful areas, and it's creating who we are as people. It's creating our memories, right? So we know that you can go and do aerobic exercise and create plasticity and generate new neurons and create new connections within that hippocampal area just by doing that 3 times a week. So that's an easy fix. That's why a lot of people sometimes report, hey, I feel way better, right? So when I go to the gym, not to mention you get norepinephrine, adrenaline, all these different neurotransmitters that make you feel better and good. So exercise is really good. If you're like, hey, I haven't exercised in 20 years, me going to the gym is unrealistic, go walk outside, right? Yeah. Go walk outside and breathe. The other incredible thing I want to mention, epigenetics is one of the most fascinating fields. If I didn't go into functional neurology, it would have been epigenetics. I really appreciate it, and I think it brings us so much power as human beings, and that's understanding we are not a victim of our genes. Like, we're just not, right? The cool thing is that we can control our gene expression by our lifestyle choices. So we are turning on, we're turning genes on and off all day long. So if I'm in a really bad, toxic environment where everybody around me is negative, they're watching the news, they have just like terrible things to say, they're aggressive and violent, well, guess what? The genes that my body turns on are going to be bad genes. And this is very simplification, right? But when I say bad genes, I'm saying that like my brain is going to deteriorate, right? My immune system is going to go down. I'm going to get more inflammation. I'm going to turn on genes that are leading more to disease states, right? So whether that's cardiovascular disease or whether it's cancer, my body's no longer healthy because of that environment that I choose to be in, right? Physically healthy. And this is just the mental component. So I'm around toxic things and my genes are going to manifest that way. I'm going to turn on genes that are not the reproductive genes, not the prosperous, healthy genes. It's going to be the more sickly genes. We see this, and we've studied this in great longitudinal studies for over a long period of time. And so we know it's real. We know it's really incredible, especially if if you're born with a genetic disorder or maybe your parents have all these sicknesses, you're not a victim of that. But the other powerful thing is day to day, like your choices, your mindset, it controls your brain connectivity, right? So if I'm in an environment where everybody's super encouraging and super happy and praising, right? And I'm doing the things I can to get good nutrition and to have good supplements in my diet and to remove as many toxins as I can, my genes, my DNA is now going to start expressing really good, healthy genes that lead for, when we say reproductive, the healthiest gene pool, right? You're able to reproduce, okay? So if you're having fertility issues, we know that there's some unhealthy things going on that are blocking fertility. So we use that terminology to say it's a healthy gene that is able to reproduce. You're not going to be having those disease states and cancer states, right? So it's really cool to understand that you have power, and sometimes it feels debilitating and so hard to say, oh my gosh, I'm having so much anxiety, I have control over this. In the moment, it may not feel that way, but put on something positive. That's why I know a lot of things with technology are on the negative side, the way we're advancing so quickly, but there's some really positive things like podcasts that are uplifting, and powerful self-talk stuff and things like that. So
yeah, that's really interesting. So you're also saying that a person who's doing everything right, but they're constantly in a very negative environment, that can eventually almost like counter
absolutely right
good stuff that they've been doing.
So you could go and change your diet and have supplements, but if you're in a toxic, I'm sure a lot of people understand or relate to the idea of being in a toxic relationship, which is an easy way to simplify it. Your toxic relationship could be the friends you keep, right? If all that negativity is going on, your mental state is going on, you are going to be turning on bad genes. You are not going to be in a happy state. That stuff wears on you and it becomes who you are and it rewires your brain, truly. So we even see this, just like there's these trends where people like really get into the news or they're watching all the stuff and they'll say, they come in and they're just super negative.
They're
and super
always
unhappy.
so worked up. That's true.
So there is valid, very powerful science behind why this stuff happens. So it's really good to kind of try to take a second. When you're in the midst of these strong feelings, it's hard to get out of yourself, right? So a couple things that I like to encourage patients to do. You can use your brain to your advantage. Here's how that works. If you can engage your cognitive cortical levels, if you're in pain, whether it's emotional pain or whether it's physical pain, your pain level will be dampened if you can engage your cortex. What that means is if you're into math or you're passionate about flags or cars, right? take the opportunity, go online, research it, and dive deep into it. During that period, you're going to get yourself out of the limbic windup, which means you have these constant thoughts of anxiety and fear. Hippocampus is firing all these fear memories. Your amygdala is getting wound up and you're having so much anxiety. You're shaking inside, heart palpitations, sweating, feel terrible, don't want to leave the house. Sitting there and thinking about all these terrible things just makes it worse.
Yeah.
So you want to do something that's going to engage your cognitive thought system, where you're going to feel passionate about it. If it's boring and you don't want to learn it, it's not going to work, right? So it could be puzzles, it could be anything.
Oh, that's really cool. You know what? I think I was doing that without realizing it. I'm sure a lot of people have too.
Yeah.
So back in college, whenever I would be really stressed with exams, I had the biggest hyperfixation in Mount Everest.
No, that's so
like
awesome.
Every time I would just do so much research. I would read so many books about it, watch all these documentaries.
That's awesome.
So now I'm realizing maybe it almost became like a coping mechanism.
Absolutely.
When I became stressed.
And it helped you, and it controlled your anxiety level, decreased it.
Yeah, I always felt better after
That's
learning
really
more
cool.
facts.
That's adorable.
That's
I love
awesome.
that.
Okay, so going back to anxiety, I know, so on social media, we've been having so many people resonate with the content we've been putting out with anxiety, like driving. That's the very first one that we put out. So can you explain a little bit more about that?
So going back to, we touched on a little bit of how our brain's number one job is survival, right? So things that are vital for us to survive. We have to eat, we have to sleep, right? We have to get blood to every cell in our body. We have to run away from any disastrous situation. We're not approaching danger. We're not putting our hand on the stove. So we have these pain responses and all these things that are meant for us to physically survive and hopefully thrive in the world, right? The hopefully thrive is a higher up, right? It's more of a privilege to thrive. Number one thing is to survive. So now let's go back to what happens when people are in a car. So typically, if somebody does not feel good in a car, we know that they have some form of a cerebellar vestibular imbalance. And the reason being is those systems are involved in motion and gravity of our world to figure out where we are in space. Okay. People don't realize this. When your system works well, you get to move in your world and you feel so good all the time you don't think about it. And it's all unconscious and reflexive. These are automatic patterns. We don't think about it, okay? Till the system gets broken. And then we have symptoms, and then you begin to think about it, and you have to think really hard about it because you actually use a compensation mechanism from our cortex to help stabilize you. But when we're in a vehicle, we are translating in gravity. That is a very otolithic stimulation. Otolithic is a vestibular, and I hit my ears because inside your ears is where you have the peripheral apparatus to our vestibular system. It's periphery. Those areas fire centrally into the brain, and we have all these central vestibular pathways. There's a big distinction between peripheral vestibular disorders and central brain vestibular disorders. Typically, what we're going to see is somebody who doesn't feel well in a car, maybe feels dizzy or just feels anxiety, is going to have what we call a centrally maintained vestibulopathy. Okay. It means that the central pathways in the brain that control our vestibular function are in balance. It's as simple as that, right? So you get in a car, and all of a sudden, your brain cannot accurately detect where you are in space. Yeah. That becomes very problematic, okay? We don't understand, like in the moments, it's not cognitively firing and saying, hey, I don't know where I am in space. What we do know is, hey, I don't feel good. I feel very anxious, right? That anxiety is almost like a protection mechanism to keep us safe, because guess what? Our reflexes, right? Our depth perception, our vision, and tracking cars around us are not working optimally. So we're a little bit unsafe behind the wheel. Not to say that you're gonna get a car accident or anything like that. But I would say if you all of a sudden are driving, you're fine, and then anxiety triggers, you probably pull over, breathe, get a snack, call a friend, do whatever it is to kind of calm your nervous system down, and then go back to driving. Yeah. Because typically what that's saying is your brain and neurological responses are not going to be real accurate if you're getting anxiety while driving.
And you see, that makes a lot of sense because I used to struggle with this earlier on, and I would say I think it's also the visual contamination with
Visual
everything else that
contamination,
comes
yes.
on.
Yes.
So like one big trigger would also be when you're driving and you have the shadows from the trees and like the sun peeking through. And then when you lean back and like the car is like vibrating.
Right.
So then like your vision's probably kind of like vibrating as
well. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Those are very good points, Elena. And so when I say vestibular cerebellum, I'm oversimplifying it as the vestibular system, but what people don't realize is our eye movements, our visual control of what we're looking at has huge relays within the vestibular system and is also controlled by the cerebellum. So it's all the same thing when we're talking about the scenario. And visual contamination means that instead of being able to look at something and inhibit everything else, your brain cannot inhibit it, meaning it's picking it up, right? So it's getting that visual motion and it's triggering you to feel like you are moving, inappropriately moving, even if you don't actually sense that you are moving. I'm in a car driving, translating, my eyes are picking up the background. You get an optokinetic response, you get these all intrusive eye movements going on. My brain is saying she is moving all over the place. Like let's say it thinks I'm moving to the left, like in a spinny rotation, or maybe it thinks I'm just floating, right? I do not have to feel that way because if my cortex is firing down to inhibit the perception of that motion, I will not actually perceive that I'm moving that way, even though all of my eye movement and my vestibular function is saying that it thinks that I'm moving that way, right? But what I do feel is anxiety.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's a lot of us get so scared of anxiety, like there's something wrong, I gotta fix this. Most of the times it's a warning sign, hey, like this needs to be fixed. And so in the scenario of getting a little bit of anxiety in the car, that's kind of it's kind of one of the good warning signs.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So a lot of the times it seems like it's not just anxiety. Like it's a lot of the times it's linked to something else. So in this instant, it's basically the vestibular system.
Vestibular and eye movement control. Absolutely. Yep, and they're like siblings. They're so interrelated. You can't have one without the other.
So then that's why you also feel dizzy when you're really, really anxious, or if you're getting a panic attack, or if you feel lightheaded or like really unstable.
Yes, that's all interconnected. Exactly. And you often hear people say that they'll feel lightheaded while they're having a panic attack and things like that. And they'll feel just like they don't know where they are in space. And then you have higher up. So as things evolve higher up in the cortex, we have a sense of being inside our body, ownership being inside of our body. This is my body, and this is what I intend to do with my body. Well, then there's people that have that outer body experience. They feel very detached, and they don't feel grounded within their body. And a lot of times that is a higher up vestibular disorder too, and that's in the parietal insular vestibular cortex. But nonetheless, like there's so many different symptoms that people can get, and the higher up in the cortex that the lesion gets, the more abstract symptoms become, specifically when it comes to these eye movement disorders and vestibular disorders. And it becomes very hard to explain. Like people struggle, like sometimes the ground feels like it's moving, or they don't feel grounded inside their body, or they're feeling this constant panic and like this sense of dread, and they can't understand where that's coming from. And so we typically see the trend that the lesion just happens to present higher and higher up when you get those more abstract sensations.
All right, so what about grocery stores? That was one of the biggest videos that kind of blew up on TikTok, where people really resonated with that one. Yeah. So we were just talking about like the visual contamination. I know that kind of goes into it.
It's a big one.
But here, I mean, you're not really traveling as fast as you are in a car.
Right.
I mean, you're just walking and trying to pick something out in the grocery store.
So grocery store, So the grocery store component is really comes down to that visual contamination. You have so many textures. You have so many things. You also have a lot of people, right? So typically you have people walking in all directions. So they're walking towards you, walking in front of you, and then you get all these textures and different things going on. If you have somebody that's not inhibiting their eye motion, they're picking up all sorts of things. And when your visual world doesn't make sense to you, that is anxiety provoking. That is that's another survival thing, right? Like we should be able to walk into a room, and we have what we call somatotopic maps in our brain, which are the maps of my body part, right? And my brain is constantly updating it. And this allows me to accurately reach out, grab something, I take a drink of water, I don't drop it, I don't have a tremor, I don't miss it, because I know where my body is. But I also have another map that's crazy important. It's called the retinotopic map. And it's the map that our eye movements create of our environment. And it is constantly adapting. So when you go into a grocery store, soon as you walk in, your brain's going to adapt and create this environmental grid of what's happening in the grocery store. Well, if your eye movements are all over the place, they're intrusive, they're broken down, your retinotopin map of your environment is what we call it skewed, right?
Okay.
That just simply means it's not accurate.
Right.
So if you have a baseline where the patient maybe doesn't have accurate somatotopic maps with their body parts, and now they have this intrusive eye movement, they go into a grocery store, both maps are failing them, and that's the map that they use to interact with the world. And so that feels terrible, right?
Yeah.
That's a survival thing. It doesn't feel good. And that's where you get the huge amount of anxiety. So the second you fire that autonomic nervous system and you're getting that hypothalamus involved, body temperature changes, you maybe start sweating, shaking, clammy hands, freezing up, flushing of skin, right? And you know, hey, something's wrong. Well, it's a response to something that maybe has been a little off in your brain for a while, right? And just know you're not alone. One of the best things you can do is just breathe, right? And the best way to compensate is to say in your cortex, like in your mind, say to your brain, I need to find a fixation point. I need to find one target to look at. So if I'm going to the grocery store, I know I want to get bananas. Have your list on your phone so you can easily look at it. A lot of times when you have anxiety, guess what? Can't remember anything, right? Because you're firing all this anxiety, hyperactivity. Your memory system is going to be failing you big time. So you have your phone, you look at it, I say, I want to get bananas. I'm going to fixate, I'm going to look at those bananas, and I'm going to walk directly towards the bananas. The second I say, I'm going to do this, I'm now engaging my frontal lobe to help stabilize my eye movements, to help stabilize my ability to look at something. And then I walk right to it, and I'm also going to be inhibiting that visual contamination of what's moving around me. So being very decisive about what you want and then fixating on something while you're walking and moving past people will help a lot.
Yeah. I also heard that like tinted glasses really help people.
Right. Yeah. So that's going back to, we've had a video on that before where we discussed about our pupillary light reflexes, right? So our pupils are controlled. I'm going to recap on this one to kind of bring it back in. Our pupils are controlled by our autonomic nervous system, and we have some beautiful data. Dr. Carrick, the founder of the field of functional neurology, he has some wonderful research on the pupillary light reflex because it gives us so much information on what's going on in the brain. Also gives us information on male versus female brains, which is really exciting. Yep. So when we look at pupil size, light comes in. Our pupils have to constrict. The act of constricting is activated by the ciliary muscles, allows us to constrict parasympathetic tone, okay? Dilation allows our pupils to get bigger, right? If there's not a lot of light in the room, my pupils are gonna be a little bit more dilated, right? In a perfect world, all this stuff happens instantaneously. I can hold my pupils constricted when I need to, and I can dilate when I need to, and there's none of this. This is called hippus, this up and down. We also look at like brain injuries and things like that. The rate to when you have constriction to dilate again is very, very important. So it's called the response time, pupillary response time. So we know that these change, meaning that people will typically take in way more light than they should, especially if they've had a concussion. Because we look and we say, okay, pupils are a little bit more dilated. The response time changes as well when to constrict and to dilate. So it's more technical terms about how cool the brain is, but the take-home point is we can use things to help filter out how much light our brain takes in. If our brain is not sending out enough of these inhibitory pathways so that we can hold parasympathetic tone to keep our eyes constricted, then my pupils are dilated and I'm taking in way too much light, which is going up to the area of my brain, the midbrain area, and it's overstimulating me. That midbrain area, basal ganglia, sends tons of information to your amygdala, hippocampus, that limbic system. So it will cause the windup of anxiety very fast. So another way to help this is just like you said, use some glasses. If you want to use sunglasses, use sunglasses. You can use blue light filters. You can use whatever you want. We do typically see that amber color filter helps people that have migraine, so you may want to look into that.
Okay. Oh, that's really interesting because I've heard how that helps people, but I didn't know the science behind as to why.
Absolutely,
so
yeah.
That's really cool.
Yep, it's a good tip.
Yeah. I know for other people they say like loop earplugs help them, so then that way, you know, like they don't get overstimulated by the noise.
Yeah.
I would say like taking things slow, taking deep breaths.
Breathing, breathing. Look at your list and then go fixate on anything in front of you. So if you're, walking down an aisle and you got to go to the next aisle, just pick something in the distance, nothing real close, nothing on your basket, because that has a different effect. You want to look at something in the distance down the aisle, just fixate on it and just kind of walk through, breathe. Some people might find that music, calming music, I wouldn't suggest having anything crazy, overstimulating sound in your ears, but calming music, super helpful, because you're kind of inhibiting all this sound, because you'll notice too, when your brain is overstimulated, and we're looking at brains that are injured, typically they're overstimulated. They're not firing enough of these inhibitory pathways. They're taking in way too much information from the environment, unnecessary information. So you'll pick up on conversations that your brain doesn't need to be attending to and things like that. So that's where headphones help, calming music helps.
Right, okay.
Yep.
So, I mean, this basically is the theme for this entire podcast, but it looks like anxiety is very much so linked to your eyes. So you can see a lot with that. And that kind of ties into how functional neurology helps people with anxiety. Right. So I know with anxiety, you typically think about going to the therapist or getting medication for it. I don't think a lot of people know that functional neurology really helps with anxiety.
Yeah, so functional neurology is going to aim to rewire and build connections in areas that are a little bit pathological, right? So they can be slightly imbalanced or they can be significantly imbalanced. And we kind of look at, hey, what areas do we need to increase more inhibition, more inhibitory pathways? Which areas do we need to activate a little more? And it's this beautiful, very complex. I mean, the brain is just such a marvelous thing. And you definitely want to go to a functionalist that has experience with this. That's very individualized with patient care, because you can take thousands of anxiety patients. All their brains are going to be vastly different, right? So because of the complexity within our limbic system, within our autonomic nervous system, the areas of imbalance or pathology could be so different, right? So we're looking at the patient individually, and then we're activating the brain, and it's a wonderful adjunct to therapy. It really is, because there's things with therapy and talk therapy that are super powerful that we're not going to have time to necessarily do here. So doing it together is wonderful, super powerful.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how are some of the ways we address anxiety? So by fixing like the vestibular system, or
and it really just depends, so some patients will have tinnitus and maybe a subtle vestibular deficit, but lots of anxiety. So we're going to address it based on what their primary imbalance in the brain is. And so typically for that, it's more of a temporal cortical area within that. Those areas firing to our limbic system, which absolutely do. That temporal lobe is always firing to that hippocampus, that memory area, right? Some people come in and they have this real disequilibrium, lightheadedness, and they have the massive amount of anxiety. Or let's say it's a POTS patient, right? So it's more dysautonomia with a lot of anxiety. So we're kind of saying, where is their main issue and what pathways are firing into that limbic system? Because anywhere in the brain that breaks down that also fires to your limbic system has a probability of causing anxiety. So it really just matters where is the issue to begin with.
So it seems like anxiety is never just anxiety. There's always going to be something else that people will be suffering from.
Absolutely.
So when they get treatment for, usually they don't come in for anxiety. Usually it's like a concussion or migraines or
accompanied by anxiety.
And then they always have anxiety with it, and then when they seek treatment,
anxiety
all of it
is
gets
better.
And they didn't even think that we would help with that. So that's awesome.
It is very cool.
Well, to close this off, so I would ask you if you have any other tips that people can do at home to kind of help with anxiety, especially if they're more wound up. I
would say if you feel like you're more wound up, if you feel like your heart rate is high, a lot of people are getting more aware of what sympathetic tone is and things like that. I would suggest doing things that are more calming, right? So people can gargle. If you gargle, you're going to be activating your parasympathetic nervous system, because that innervates our palate. So when you use that motor tone of the palate to gargle, so it's going to have a calming effect. With the gargling, you're gargling 15 seconds, but you got to do it multiple times a day. It's not like a one and done thing. Breathing is super powerful, right? The other thing I really preach, and I think a lot of people think like, oh, that's not that helpful, are brain breaks, and they're actually very helpful. So 5 to 10 minutes, you're just like stepping away from the chaos, breathing, having as little stimulation as possible, and you're just letting your brain kind of cool down.
Okay.
Right? And sometimes that may mean like somebody has calming music in their ears and they're just walking around the block, right? Or maybe that means you're sitting in your chair with your eyes closed, quiet, and just relaxing, and you set a timer on your phone. Or maybe you're listening to a daily prayer or meditation app, whatever it is that you like, but it's just so many people, they're on their phone scrolling and they're used to this go, go, go mentality. The go, go, go mentality does not facilitate good cognition. It does not facilitate good memory, right? So as we're aging, we really want to, the telltale sign that we're aging well is that our memory, our short-term memory is doing well.
Yeah.
If you notice that all this stuff is happening around you and your short-term memory, like what you ate for lunch or who you saw a few days ago, if that's not good, that's not a good sign.
Yeah.
And the best thing you could do is give yourself some brain breaks throughout the day. Allow your brain. So what the brain break does is allows the neurons to get down to a resting potential. It helps increase more of those inhibitory pathways. If your brain is firing high, there is no way that your body, your autonomic nervous system, can get enough blood to the brain. So we know that down the line, doesn't matter if it's a month or 10 years down the line, there's going to be consequences, because if a neuron cannot get enough blood supply, it eventually dies off. Okay?
Right. Yeah.
So brain breaks are super helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's.
Yeah.
I think that's enough to digest.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
absolutely.
Thank you for watching. Yeah, I would say that basically concludes our episode for today.
Yeah, about anxiety in the brain
Yeah,
and how you can help it.
It's a huge subject, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it again. But that is all we have for you. We'll see you next time.
Thank
Bye.
you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of FNT. Please like, follow, and subscribe to our show, and don't forget to check us out on social media. If you or a loved one are seeking treatment, please visit us at precisionbraincenter.com.